Hey friends, what up? Welcome back to Babylon Talmud. Today we're studying Daf Tesayin, Daf 16 of Masechta Hagiga. Friends, well, who could tell me what Daf 16 talks about? It's Geschmack. So the first part of the Daf is like, more agadati kind of stuff. Friends, at the bottom of Daf Tesayin Amud Aleph, there's a Mishnah that is mind-blowing. Well, I feel like it would be better if I didn't make the following statement, but I gotta, cause I care too much about you. Well, I don't know, I just built that up for no reason. Anyways, friends, oh gosh, I just confused everybody. I'm sorry, we're going weiter. Okay. Friends, we're going to start in Daf Tezvav Amud Beis, 3 lines from the bottom of the page. Tell me when you're ready. Shal Nimus Hagardi es Reb Meir. Okay, so I actually probably should have read this last night. First, I thought that I stopped a little bit early last night, but okay, whatever it is. It's basically the last little tidbit, the last little bit related to Acher. Shal Nimus Hagardi es Reb Meir. Nimus the Gardi. Who could tell me what a Gardi is? It's a weaver. So he asked Reb Meir, "Kol Omer denochus lior salik." Does every clump of wool that goes into dye, so the dye kind of gets absorbed by the wool? Omer Reb Meir says, "Koman dava noki agav ime salik." Kol lo ava noki agav ime lo salik. That if it was basically completely pure, so then the dye goes in. But if it wasn't completely pure, then the dye doesn't necessarily go in. And therefore, as relates to Acher, he wasn't necessarily completely pure, and that is why maybe the Torah that he studied didn't completely get absorbed properly into the kishkes. Friends, moving on. Rabbi Akiva Ola b'shalom v'yord b'shalom. So the Brisa had said that out of the 4 that went into the Pardes, Ben Zoma, Ben Azai, Acher, and Rabbi Akiva is the only one who left unscathed. The pasuk says about Rabbi Akiva, Moshcheni achrechan arutza, draw me after you, and we will run. Sounds good to me. And even Rabbi Akiva, the ministering angels wanted to push him away. The Eibishter says, Hanichu leave this elder alone, that he is fit to use my honor. My Darash, how did Rabbi Akiva know which areas in the Pardes to avoid? Right, he managed to stay to come and to go unscathed. So how did he know this? Okay, he comes from the myriads of holy. Sounds nice. Osu b'rivava shalo, that there's a certain sign in his myriads. Alright, and I guess Rabbi Akiva knew that sign. Alright. Rababo Omar, says Rababo, dogu merivava. Okay. He's, I don't know. What does dogu mean? Is that like surrounded, or like elated, or, raised up from his myriads? Dugmuhu b'rivava is an example. Bervava Shalo, in his myriads, I guess some kind of indication of where God is, and I guess where not to go. For Shlakish, Amar says, Hashem Tzvakos Shemo Odonu B'tzava Shelo, that God is a God of legions, is his name, so he's a master in his legions. Alright, so I guess he just stayed away from the legions. Lo Bruach Hashem. Now, where's this pasuk? This pasuk is in Melachim, in Kings. So it says that God is not in the wind. V'achar ruach rash. Then after the wind was a loud noise. Lo b'rash Hashem. It says the Eibishter is not in the loud noise. V'achar rash eish. Then after the loud noise came a fire. Lo b'eish Hashem. God is not in this fire. V'achar eish called mamadaka. And after the fire, a very thin voice. V'hinei Hashem over. And that's when God was passing. So I guess that there are indications of when you know that God's coming by, and I guess if you're going into the Pardes, you should probably find cover. Rabbi Akiva knew exactly, I guess, how to navigate the Pardes, and he managed to leave unscathed. That there are 6 things that are said about demons. Of these 6 things, in 3 ways they are like the ministering angels, and in 3 ways they are like flesh and blood. In 3 ways they are like the ministering angels. That demons have wings, like ministering angels. And they fly from one end of the world to the other, like the ministering angels. And they know what's going to happen in the future, like the ministering angels. What, you really think that demons know what's going to happen in the future? Rather, it means that they hear things from behind the heavenly curtains, like the ministering angels. And in 3 ways, the demons are like the people. They eat and they drink like the people. They procreate, they reproduce like the people. And they perish like the people. There are 6 things that are said about human beings. In 3 ways they are like ministering angels, and in 3 ways they are like the animals. In 3 ways human beings are like ministering angels. They have knowledge, intellect, like the ministering angels. And they walk, so like on 2 legs vertically, like ministering angels. And they speak Lashon HaKodesh, the holy tongue, like the ministering angels. And in 3 ways the humans are like the animals. They eat and they drink like an animal. And they procreate like animals. And they release, expel excrement like animals. Somebody who looks at 4 things, it's better that he should not be born. That's what the Mishnah said. So I understand why a fellow shouldn't look what's above, what's too high, what's in the heavens, what's below the earth, what's going to be in the future. But looking at history, looking in the past, what's the big deal with that? Whatever happened, happened. I mean, you're just observing what happened. So Rabbi Yochanan and Rabbi Elazar, both Rabbi Yochanan and Rabbi Elazar say, it's a parable to a king of flesh and blood, that he said to his servants. What did he say? Binu li paltun gedolin al ha'ashba. Make me a big palace on a garbage heap. So they did that. So they built a palace, but the palace was underneath a garbage heap. Or at least it was, maybe it means that it was a garbage heap and they replaced it with a palace. So you don't want to look at the history over there and say, it used to be a garbage heap. Sometimes, even looking back in history can sort of be negative. Even though, sure, you're just observing things, but we might not want you to do so much poking around. Interesting. Somebody who doesn't have, mercy or empathy or sensitivity towards the honor of his of his owner. Better that he shouldn't have come to the world. What does this mean? So Rabbi says that somebody who doesn't have mercy on his owner, that's somebody who looks at a rainbow. The Gemara is going to explain why, what's the issue with looking at a rainbow. Rav Yosef says Rav Yosef that is a reference to somebody who violates a sin in private. So Mistaka B'Kesh is the chsiv. What's the issue with looking at a rainbow? As it says in the pasuk, Kamara Keshes Asher Yeh Ba'anon B'Yom HaGeshem, like the rainbow in the clouds on a rainy day, excuse me, I'm sorry for that. So like the rainbow in the clouds on a rainy day, Ken Mare Hanoga Sofiv, that is like the sight of the emanating around it. Who marid muskvod Hashem, and that is the image of God, of the honor of God. Meaning, in a rainbow is the image of the honor of God, and therefore, by staring at a rainbow, you're basically staring directly at God, and that's not it's not very respectful. Rav Yosef Omer says, Rav Yosef is over Aver B'Seiser, that somebody who violates a sin in private is somebody who doesn't have mercy on the honor of his master and better of his owner, and better that he shouldn't be have come into the world. It's like Rabbi Yitzchak says, that somebody who does a sin in hide, in secret, so it's as if he's like pushing away the feet of God. As the Pasuk says, that so says God, that the heavens are my throne, and the land, the ground, the earth is my footstool. So therefore, if the earth is his footstool, and you're basically saying, well, the Eibishter won't see me over here, let me sin. So you're basically pushing away God and saying, this isn't your footstool, your feet are not here, not in this nook, and therefore you sin. So if you sin in private, it's like you're pushing away God. Ini, is that really so? But 1 second, the elder says that if a fellow sees that his evil inclination is coming down stark, and also she should go up to a place where nobody knows him, and he should put on black clothing and wrap himself in black, and he should do, and then do his heart's desire, and do not disgrace God's name in public. So we see there that Davke, a fellow who is overwhelmed by his Yetzer Hara and he has to do Epis and Aver, so he should go to a place where nobody knows him. I.e., on the one hand, Rabbi Yitzchak is saying that a fellow who violates a sin in secret, so that's bad news, like you're pushing away God. But on the other hand, we're saying that Davka, if you have to do an Aver, better to do it in secret. So what's the deal? So it depends. If he's capable of subduing his evil inclination, so then if he allows his inclination nonetheless to overpower him and lemaisa to sin, so then if he's doing it in private and he could have prevented it, so then it's like he's pushing away God. However, in a situation where it would be impossible to overcome his evil inclination, so then, go to a place where at least where nobody knows you, and don't make a Chilul Hashem in public. Darsh Rabbi Yehuda Rabbi Nachmani, so Rabbi Yehuda Rabbi Nachmani, he expounded. Mitugmani to Rish Lakish, and he was the translator of Rish Lakish. What did he say? Somebody looks at the following three things, his vision becomes weak. A rainbow, the like chief rabbi, and the priests. Somebody looks at a rainbow, his eyes go weak, as the pasuk says, that like the vision of a rainbow in the clouds on a rainy day, is the appearance of the image of the honor of God, and therefore, if you're looking at a rainbow, you're basically looking directly at the honor of God, and that can have a detrimental effect on your vision. Where am I? Where did I go? Benosi. Somebody looks at like the chief rabbi. The pasuk says, that you'll place from your splendor upon this fellow. So for the Nasi, it's like he has the splendor of God, and therefore, if you're looking directly at the chief rabbi, so it's like you're looking directly at God, and it's your vision may become weak. And finally, somebody who stares at the priests when the temple stood, that they would stand on their platform and they would bless Israel with with God's name, and says Rashi, and the divine presence was resting upon their fingers. So if a fellow looks at the fingers of the Kohanim at the time that they are stating blessing, their priestly blessings, so then memele, your eyesight may suffer because you're looking directly at the divine presence. And Rabbi Nachmani, the translator of Rish Lakish, expounded. What does the pasuk say? Al taminu be'reya, al tivtachu be'oluf. Do not believe the friend. Do not have faith in the general. If the evil inclination says, meh, just sin a shtickle, and the Eibishter will forgive you, al taimin, do not listen to him. Al taimin be'reya ve'inreya. Okay, fine. There's probably a missing word over here. What was the word? I don't know. Wait, what? The mochel loch al taimin? Oh, okay, fine. What do you want me to tell you? So al taimin bereya, as opposed to says al taimin bereya, right? Do not listen to the. I think it's bereya, right? Is that Where's this pasuk? I can't. You see, I can't read the things. They're too small over here. I think it says bereya. To your friend. Akoponim. So fine. So tamim bereya vein reya eli yitzhara. And the reya is the yitzhara. Shneimar, as the pasuk says, ki yetzer lev ha'adam ra min urav, because a friend's yetzer is bad from his young days, and I guess Ra is the same letters as Reya. Vein Olaf el Kadosh Baruch Hu, and the general is the Eibishter Shneimar Olaf Nu'urai Ato, that you are the general of my youth. Shematomer Mimeid Bi, and maybe you're going to say, yeah, but who's going to testify against me anyways? So Avnei Beso V'Korus Beso Shladom in Mi'idin Bo. Well, the stones and the beams of a fellow's house are going to testify against him, about him. Shneimar, as the pasuk says, Kievan Mikir Tizak, that the stones from the walls cry out, V'chafis me eitziaineno, and like a chip, a splinter from wood will answer. The Chacham says the Chacham Nishmaso Shadam Idabo, that a fellow's soul testifies against him. Shneimar, as the pasuk says, Mishichvas Cheikecha Shmor Pisrei Picha. No, Mishocheves Beis Cheikecha. Right? I believe. Mishocheves Beis. Now I lost the place. Mishocheves Cheikecha Shmor Pisrei Picha. From the one that lies in your bosom, guard the openings of your mouth. Ezohi Davar Shocheves B'Cheiko Shel Adam. What is a thing that lies in the bosom of a fellow? Haviyom Hazon Neshama. That is the spirit, the soul. Rabbi Zvika Omar says, Zvika Shnei Malachi Asharasim Lavan also Hein Midin Bo. The two ministering angels that escort a fellow, they testify against him. Shneimar, as the pasuk says, Ki Malach Vitzavel Shmocha B'Chod V'Echecho, that the Eibishter will make angels for you to guard you in all your ways, and those angels can testify against you. The Chacham Om says the Chacham Eivar Shalatim Midin Bo, that a fellow's limbs testify against him. That you are my witnesses. So is the word of God, and I am God. Okay. Well, all right. What am I going to tell you, friends? Be careful out there. All right, friends. You ready for a mind-blowing Mishnah? Mind blown. Says the Mishnah, Yossi ben... Wow. Dude, I can't even say it. It's so powerful. Wow. Yossi ben Yuezer omer shlo lismoch, Yosef ben Yochanan omer lismoch. Friends, this is mind-blowing. Who are these people? These are the first of the zugos. When do you ever see in the Mishnayos the zugos? I mean, Pirkei Avos, fine. I mean, this is like here, Moshe Kibel Torah Misina Misar Yoshua Yoshua Zakenim Misur LaAnshe Knesset Agadola, and then we start saying, Hey Mamru Shlosha Devarim, Then what? They give it to Shimon HaTzadik, and I can't remember, Antigonus Socho, or something like that. And then it goes to Yossi ben Yoezer, Ish Tzreida, and Yossi ben Yochanan, Nis Yerushalayim. I mean, this is insanity. I mean, we never see, friends, we've been learning together for more than 2 years. I mean, when did we ever see the zugos quoted in Mishnayos? I mean, mind-blowing. And says Rashi on the Mishnah, says, V'zoi machlokas v'shona sh'ayse b'chach b'Yisrael. Ooh, friends. What do you want me to tell you? I mean, this is the first recorded machlokas. Wow. Yeah, they talk about it in the Akdoma, the Ram's Akdoma, the Mishnayos. They talk a little bit about how at what point machlokas began. But I guess we're saying that this was the first recorded machlokas, I guess, between Yossi ben Yoezer, Ish Tzreida, and Yossi ben Yochanan, Nis Yerushalayim. Anyways, now that our minds have been blown, let's go weiter. Yossi ben Yoezer, Omer Shlo L'smoch. So says Yossi ben Yoezer, you don't do smicha, all right, on Yom Tov, right? We saw this in Masechta Beya about doing smicha on Yom Tov. So it says Yossi ben Yoezer, you do not lean on a korban on Yom Tov. Fine. Yossi ben Yochanan Omer Lismoch, whereas Yossi ben Yochanan says yes, you do smicha. You lean on an animal before slaughtering it on Yom Tov. Yoshua ben Prachya Omer Shelo Lismoch. Yoshua ben Prachya says, do not do smicha. Nitar Beili Omer Lismoch. Whereas Nitar Beili says that you do smicha. Again, going through the zugos, right? Those are already the first 2 sets of zugos. Yehuda ben Tabai Omer Shelo Lismoch. Shimon ben Shotach Omer Lismoch. Shmaya Omer Lismoch. Avtayon Omer Shelo Lismoch. Right, so all the zugos, right, they're basically divided on do you do smicha, don't you do smicha. Hillel and Menachem lo nechleku. Now Hillel and Menachem, okay, they did not argue. Yotzu Menachem nichnas Shammai. Now eventually Menachem left. The Gemara is going to discuss what does it mean that he left. Where did he go? But Menachem left. Enter Shammai. Shammai omer shelo lismoch, Hillel omer lismoch. Shammai says you do not do smicha on Yom Tov, and Hillel says that you do. And then the Gemara ends on a high note, and the Mishnah ends on a high note and says that all of these zugos, right, Yossi ben Yoezer and Yossi ben Yochanan, Yoshua ben Prachya, Nitar Beili. So the first one listed of the pair was the Nasi, and the second one listed was the Abezdin. Apparently the Nasi was kind of like the number 1 kind of rabbinic figure, and the Abezdin was like the number 2, apparently. So in the zugos, so Yossi ben Yoezer was the Nasi, Yossi ben Yochanan was the Abezdin, Yoshua ben Prachya was the Nasi, Nitar Beili was the Abezdin, etc. So for each of the zugos, the first one listed was the Nasi, the second one was the Abezdin. Tanu Rabbanan, says the Gemara, Shlosha mizugis harishonis sha'amu shelo lismoch. So 3 of the first 3 zugis mentioned, they said shelo lismoch, that you don't do smicha. V'shnayim mizugis ha'acharonim sha'amu lismoch, and 2 from the last 2 group of zugis who said to do smicha, hayu nesiim, they were the nesiim. Ushniim loim, avos bezdin, and the other ones that were mentioned was the bezdin de Meir. That is Reb Meir's opinion. V'chacham say the chachamim Yehuda ben Tabai abezdin v'Shimon ben Shatach nasi. That the exception being Yehuda ben Tabai and Shimon ben Shatach. Because if we look in the Mishnah, it says Yehuda ben Tabai says not to do smicha, and Shimon ben Shatach says to do smicha. So Yehuda ben Tabai was mentioned before Shimon ben Shatach. The Chacham said that even though Yehuda ben Tabai was mentioned first, he was the Abezdin and Shimon ben Shatach was the Nasi. Okay, fine, very good. So according to Reb Meir, Yehuda ben Tabai was the Nasi and Shimon ben Shatach was the Abezdin. According to the Chachamim, it was the opposite. Yehuda ben Tabai was the Abezdin and Shimon ben Shatach was the Nasi. In fact, the Gemara Mantana Ladutanu Rabbanon, who is the author of Matana Ladutanu Rabbanon, who is the author of that which the rabbis taught. Amr Yehuda ben Tabai, says Yehuda ben Tabai, Erev ben Echama im Larati et Zomemim, that basically, so Erev ben Echama is apparently like a pretty intense statement. It's like, Erev ben Echama, I will see my condolences, right? Like, kilu, my children will die and I will receive condolences, i.e., he's like swearing on his life, kilu, like, Erev ben Echama, I will certainly, see, I guess, im lo aragti et zomemim, that he's basically saying, I killed a zomemim, lo tzimiliban shel tzidukin, she'omim ein aydm zomemim nerogin ad she'horig anidon. That who say that aydm zomemim can only be killed once the other fellow was killed. Friends, there's a few things we need to discuss here. Wow, I feel like it's been a while since we had like a concept that we actually had to discuss like in this way. Anyways, friends, there's like 3 kind of steps that we need to talk about over here. First of all, who could tell me what aydm zomemim are? Aydm zomemim are essentially false witnesses, but in a specific kind of way. That basically, let's say you have Reuven and Shimon. They're testifying that Levi killed Yehuda, let's say. So, now, okay, fine. So Reuven and Shimon, they testify that Levi killed Yehuda. Fine. Now, Yisachar and Zvulun, they come and they say, wait a second, Reuven and Shimon, how can you testify that you saw Levi kill Yehuda in New York? Because after all, right, how could you say that you saw Levi kill Yehuda in New York on, I don't know, the 1st of the month at 7 in the morning, whatever it is? At that time, you were with us in Miami Beach. So clearly, you're lying. And that's what's called Imanu Ayisem B'makom Ploni. You were with us in a completely different place at that time. That's what's called aydm zomemim, right? That basically, Reuven and Shimon were trying to, testify falsely against Levi, and then they were disproven by Yisachar and Zvulun. So the pasuk says, "V'asisem lo kasher zomim la'asos la'achim." So you do to these aydm zomemim what they were trying to do to the other fellow. So if Reuven and Shimon were trying to get Levi killed, so guess what? We kill Reuven and Shimon. So now, okay, so that's step 1. That's what aydm zomemim are, right? That the witnesses who are trying to testify against somebody, and it turns out that they're lying in the way that this construct of Imanu Ayisim B'makom Ploni, that you couldn't have witnessed that because you were with us somewhere else. And the halacha is that we do to those people what they were trying to do to the other person. Now, step 2, or sort of qualification number 2, is that it has to apply to both. Kilu, Yisachar and Zvulun have to come and say, both Reuven and Shimon, you were both with us in Miami Beach. It's not enough to just say that Reuven was with us. It's only aydm zomemim if both of them become aydm zomemim. So that is sort of detail number 2. And detail number 3 is that, in the event that Reuven and Shimon are testifying that Levi killed Yehuda, and therefore it's basically a capital case, so they would only be killed if Yisachar and Zvulun come along and undo their testimony once Levi was already condemned to death, was already, right, the verdict was already out against Levi to be killed. They were, right, and we don't dilly-dally in Jewish law. It's not like, in the United States you could be on, I don't know that much, but my understanding is that in the United States, at least in certain places, you can be on death row for quite some time. And apparently, you can't even, whatever, like, some places you have inmates on death row and they don't even actually have ways to kill these people. So they're literally just on there indefinitely. It's not like that in Jewish law. A fellow is chayiv misa, they kill him that day. So, because otherwise it's called, what's it called? It's called, what's it called when you leave the judgment hanging? I don't think it's called halana sadin. It's one second. Let me think about this for a second. Yeah, of course, inoyadin, I believe is what it's called. Inoyadin. Basically, we don't want to, if the guy's got to die, so just get it over with. So, anyways, so that's sort of qualification number 3. Is that if Reuven and Shimon were testifying that Levi is chayiv misa, so we would only kill Reuven and Shimon, like they were trying to do to Levi, if the verdict was already out that Levi is chayiv misa. So those are the 3 things, right? Aydm zomemim is that, we say to these witnesses, Imanu ayisim b'makom ploni, you're with us in a different place, therefore you guys are liars. Number 2, this has to be, right, both witnesses have to become Aydm zomemim. And number 3, Reuven and Shimon would only be chayiv misa if the verdict was already out against Levi that he's chayiv misa. Now, the tzidukim, however, argued slightly different with that last point, which is that Reuven and Shimon would only be chayiv misa if Levi was already killed, not if the verdict was out against him. No, he would have to actually already have been killed in order for Reuven and Shimon to be chayiv misa because of aydm zomemim. So now, with that introduction, let's go back into the Gemara. So, Tana lo de Tana Rabbanan, who is the author of the following teaching on Rabbi Yehuda ben Tabai. So it says Rabbi Yehuda ben Tabai, Erev ben Nechama, im lo aragti ayd zomemim, that he's saying that I certainly killed an individual ayd zomemim. So going back to our example of Reuven and Shimon testifying against Levi that he killed Yehuda, and then Yisachar and Zvulun come along and make Reuven and Shimon aydm zomemim. No, so in this case, Yisachar and Zvulun came along and testified that just Reuven was with them in Miami Beach. And so what happened? Rabbi Yehuda ben Tabai killed Reuven. In order to remove any notion from the hearts of the tzidukin, that they would say in aydm zomemim neragan at sheyahoreg anidon, that they would say that aydm zomemim are only killed once, if Levi has already been killed. So therefore, in order to make a statement, Yehuda ben Tabai killed just Reuven. After Levi, the verdict was already out against Levi that he was chayiv misa, and then Yisachar and Zvulun come and they say, look, Reuven was with us in Miami Beach, and that was enough for Yehuda ben Tabai, and he says that, all right, Reuven, we're going to kill you, and I believe some of the type of penalty for this kind of a thing is chopping off of the head. So, chaval. Anyways, so that's what Yehuda ben Tabai says, that he killed Reuven for being an ayd zomemim. Omar lo Shimon ben Shatach. Now Shimon ben Shatach says to Yehuda ben Tabai, says, Erev ben Nechama, im lo shafachta dam naki. Shimon ben Shatach said, you certainly killed an innocent man. Sharei amru chacham, because the chacham said, ein aydm zomemim neragan ad shezomu shnei. That in order for aydm zomemim to be punished, both of them have to become aydm zomemim, both Reuven and Shimon. It's not enough to just make Reuven an ayd zomemim, and therefore Yehuda ben Tabai, you killed somebody who was not deserving of death. Vein lokan ad shezomu shnei. And if it was a situation of malchus, i.e., if Reuven and Shimon were testifying that Levi is chayiv malchus, well then both Reuven and Shimon would have to become aydm zomemim in order for us to administer malchus to both of them. And also if they were testifying that Reuven owes money to Shimon, that Levi owes money, right? Reuven and Shimon were testifying that Levi owes money to Yehuda, and it turns out that they were aydm zomemim. So in order for them to have to pay, in order for them to have to pay what they were trying to make Levi pay, so then they would both have to be aydm zomemim. Now, continues the Brisa, Mi'ad kibel olav Yehuda ben Tabai, immediately Yehuda ben Tabai accepted upon himself, she'numor halacha ela b'fnei Shimon ben Shatach, that from this point on, he is only going to teach halacha with Shimon ben Shatach around, so that if he's making a mistake, Shimon ben Shatach will correct him. right? Basically, Rabbi Yehuda ben Tabai was modeh. He admitted to Shimon ben Shatach that he did the wrong thing, that he basically killed Reuven when he should not have, because in order to kill Reuven, both Reuven and Shimon would have to be aydm zomemim. Kol yomav shel Yehuda ben Tabai imishtatech al kiva shelo soharug. For the rest of Yehuda ben Tabai's life, he would sort of prostrate himself on the grave of Reuven, of that fellow. V'haya kolu nishma, and his voice would be heard, his weeping, his wailing would be heard. And everyone thought that it was the voice of Reuven. Obviously Reuven is a contrived example, but it was the voice of this fellow who was killed by Yehuda ben Tabai. So Amar Lohem Koli, and Yehuda ben Tabai says, no, it's not his voice, it's my voice. Tedu, and you should know, that, when I die, ve'en kolu nishma, you're no longer going to hear my voice anymore. So therefore, it's proof that it's my voice that's crying, not the voice of Reuven. Omar le Ravacha b'Rav Ashi. Ravacha b'Rav says to Rav Ashi, v'duma payuse paise. How do you know that it wasn't Yehuda ben Tabai's voice? Maybe it was the voice of Reuven, and maybe the reason why the voices stopped after Yehuda ben Tabai died, it's not because it was Yehuda ben Tabai's voice, it was the voice of Reuven. However, maybe when Yehuda ben Tabai got up to heaven, Dilma Payuse Paise, maybe Yehuda ben Tabai managed to get Reuven to kind of calm down a little bit, to have him chill out a bit. Or Bedina Tabai, right? Or maybe Reuven was able to sort of take Yehuda ben Tabai to heavenly court. Maybe that's why he stopped crying. So Zeu. Okay, fine. So Yehuda ben Tabai said that he was the one crying, but maybe it was actually the Reuven crying. Okay, fine. So now Maniha. So now going back to the original question, who is the author? Right. So who is the author of this brisa? Right? Because we had seen earlier a machlokas between Reb Meir and the Chacham, that according to Reb Meir, Yehuda ben Tabai was the nasi. Now, according to the Chachamim, Yehuda ben Tabai was the abezdin. So now, Yomad b'Shlomo Reb Meir. So I understand according to Reb Meir, Dam Shimon ben Shatach abezdin, Reb Yehuda ben Tabai nasi. So I understand according to Reb Meir, who says that Reb Yehuda ben Tabai was the nasi and Shimon ben Shatach was the abezdin. So Hainu de Kamori Alocha b'fnei Shimon ben Shatach. So that is why initially Yehuda ben Tabai was able to teach halacha in front of Shimon ben Shatach. I.e., on his own, he said he killed Reuven, right? So that would make sense for Yehuda ben Tabai to go out on his own to kill Reuven if he was the nasi, if he was the chief rabbi. Eliyahu Rabbanon. But if it's the rabbis that Shimon ben Shatach was the nasi, well then the Amr Yehuda ben Tabai abezdin Shimon ben Shatach nasi, that Yehuda ben Tabai was the abezdin, but Shimon ben Shatach was the chief rabbi. So abezdin b'fnei nasi mimore halacha. So then, would the abezdin teach halacha in front of the nasi? I.e., if Shimon ben Shatach, like the rabbis were saying, it was the nasi, then how could Yehuda ben Tabai have taught a halacha and concluded a halacha in front of Shimon ben Shatach and went ahead and killed this Reuven in our example? So we said no, that's not necessarily proof. My kibel olive, right? So it could be that Shimon ben Shatach was in fact the nasi. What it means is kibel olive, the Yehuda ben Tabai, who was the abezdin, accepted upon himself the ka'amr le'tztarufe, to join together with him. Dafilu itztarufe nami lo mitztarifno. No, okay. So it could be that no, in fact, Shimon ben Shatach was the nasi. So what exactly happened with this whole story with Reuven the witness and the aydm zomemim? Well, as the abezdin, Yehuda ben Tabai was still able to sit in a court, right, and to give a verdict. So he just, he couldn't be more halacha in front of Shimon ben Shatach, but maybe Shimon ben Shatach wasn't there at the time that he gave this verdict against Reuven, and and therefore what Yehuda ben Tabai, and so therefore Yehuda ben Tabai was allowed to kind of give this verdict because Shimon ben Shatach wasn't there. But after he heard from Shimon ben Shatach that he messed up and Mamish killed somebody who should not have been killed, he made up that he was only going to rule halacha if Shimon ben Shatach was actually there. He wouldn't rule in his absence anymore. Shimon ben Shatach had to be there and be part of the Beis Din as well in order for Yehuda ben Tabai to give a halachic opinion in order to avoid sort of the unfortunate situation that happened when Reuven got killed. But in fact, you could argue that Shimon ben Shatach was the Nasi. Now, moving on in the Mishnah said Yatzu Menachem v'nichnas Shammai v'chulei. So, super interestingly, the Mishnah says, so initially, Hillel was with a fellow named Menachem. And it says Menachem left and was replaced by Shammai. Where did Menachem go? I mean, this is extremely interesting stuff. Hillel, right? We always think of Hillel and Shammai. Initially there was a Menachem. And he kind of went somewhere. Where? Where did he go? Abaye says he kind of went off the deep end. Rava Omar Yatzel Avodas HaMelech says Rava, he went to work for the government. Tanan Am Yochim, we talk a little bit like this. Yatzel Menachem Avodas HaMelech, that Menachem went to work for the government. V'yatzu imo shmonim zugos tamidim levushin serukin. And with Menachem went 80 pairs of students who were wearing government fancy clothing. Amr Shem bar Abba says Shem bar Abba Amr B'Yochanan, in the name of Yochanan. The Olam Atei Shvus Kala Beinecha. Friends, a shvus should never be taken lightly. Who can remember what a shvus is? A shvus is like an Isser D'Rabbanan, right? For example, we learned Daf Lamed Vav Masech Beya in Rochan Agav Behema that we don't ride on an animal, right? And we don't climb trees. So a shvus, these dinim d'Rabbanan should not be taken lightly. Sharei smicha eina ela mishum shvus, because leaning on an animal on Yom Tov is really just a shvus, right? For the same reason that we don't ride on an animal, so we also don't put all of our weight on an animal and lean on it before slaughtering it on Yom Tov. So that's just a shvus. It's a din d'Rabbanan. V'nechel kuba gedolei ador, and yet all of the greatest elders of the generation argued regarding a shvus, regarding smicha, leaning on an animal. Pshita. Well, isn't that obvious that you need to take shvuses seriously? So shvus mitzvah itzricha lei. He says, yeah, but I may have thought that a shvus, in the context of a mitzvah, such as leaning on an animal, on a korban, so maybe that would be okay. Hanami pshita. But, okay, isn't that also obvious that if it's a shvus, that you're not allowed to do, you're not allowed to lean on this animal, so you're not allowed to lean on an animal. So the Gemara says, wait, but I may have thought, right, there's a machlokas about if you actually need to do smicha on a korban bichlal, that there's a question that when it comes to obligatory obligations, so maybe you don't actually have to do smicha at all. So what Rabbi Yochanan is coming to say is that, no, everyone agrees that you have to do smicha on obligatory obligation, korbanos. The question over here is really just a question of, is leaning on an animal a shvus or not? Is it also midrabanan or not? And that's the machlokas here. So what Rabbi Yochanan is coming to say is that the machlokas that we're seeing in the Mishnah is about whether the leaning on the animal on Yom Tov would be considered a shvus or not, but it's not a machlokas about whether you have to do smicha bichlal. Rabbi Bar Chama says Rabbi Bar Chama shmamina smicha b'chol kolcho b'yuna. So says Rabbi Bar Chama that we can see from here that that when you lean on an animal before slaughtering it, you have to lean with all of your with all of your strength. You lean on the animal. Because if it enters your mind that you don't need to do it with all of your strength, so my call of it lismoch. right? From the fact that there's a machlokas between can you do smicha or not, because we're concerned that maybe it's a shvus, maybe it's like riding on an animal, right? If you're putting right, so that implies that you're putting all your weight on it. That's why we have to consider, well, if you're putting all of your weight on it, is it considered a shvus, like riding on your animal? Because if you didn't have to put all your weight on it, so then who really cares? Right? Who cares? Let him do smicha if he's not actually putting all of his weight on it. So from the fact that there's a machlokas about can you do smicha or not, so memele, it means that when you do smicha, when you lean on the animal before slaughtering it, you have to put all of your weight on the animal. Meisvei. However, we have a question. Dabro b'nei Yisrael v'somach, speak to the males of Israel and they will lean on their animals. B'nei Yisrael somchen bein b'nos Yisrael somchos. That it's the males who have an obligation, the boys have an obligation to do smicha, to lean on the animals. Ve'ein b'nos Yisrael somchos. The girls do not have an obligation to do smicha on animals. Reb Yossi, Reb Shimon Omim, says Reb Yossi and Reb Shimon b'nos Yisrael somchos v'shus. And nonetheless, girls would be allowed to lean on animals volitionally, optionally. Omer Reb Yossi says Reb Yossi sochli Abba Elazar, that Abba Elazar said to me, one time we had a calf of a korban shlomim, and we brought it to the women's courtyard, and the women did smicha on the animal. Now, not because there is an obligation for women to do smicha, but just so that the women should be part of it, so that they'll feel included in the korban shlom. Now, getting back to our question, right? We had said, remember, Chama says that it must be that smicha is with all of your strength, which is why they're arguing about can you do it on Yom Tov or not. But if it enters your mind that smicha is with all of your strength, so I don't understand. If we're saying that smicha is with all of your strength, then how could it be that Abba Elazar is telling Rabbi Yossi that they just, brought the korban, which is kodshim, to the Ezras Nashim so that the women could lean on it? I mean, if they don't have an obligation to do smicha, and smicha is with all of your strength, which means that they're basically bringing the animal to the women, and they're going to do smicha with all of their strength, which is basically avoda b'kodshim, right? Kind of working and applying, some kind of, I guess, what exactly? It's working, I guess, right? I guess you're forcing the animal to sustain all of your weight, for no reason, right? Because there's no obligation. So that would therefore sound like you don't do smicha with all of your strength, and that is why they were able to bring the shlomim to the women to do smicha, even though they're not obligated to do smicha, because it wasn't with all their strength anyway. So it's not like they're doing avoda with kodshim. So the Gemara answers la'olam eimalach ba'inam b'chol kocho. So really, say no. You do need to do smicha with all of your strength. De'amina lehu akpu yadaychu. Well, then how do we explain why they brought the korban to the women to do smicha? If they're putting all their weight on it, wouldn't that be avodah b'kodshim? So we say no. We said just kind of take it easy, just kind of float on the. Don't exactly put all of your weight on the on the animal. If that's the case, so then when we say that we brought the animal not because they have the women have an obligation to do nashim, but to do smicha, typically the eina l'smicha klal. Say that the reason why we would bring it over is because they weren't actually doing. Not only are they not obligated in doing smicha, but they weren't actually doing smicha because they were not putting all the weight on the animal. So Rabbi Chadav Kamar says Rabbi, it's saying two things. So first of all, they weren't actually doing smicha at all because smicha has to be with all of your weight, and they weren't using all of their weight. And additionally, so that the women would have good vibes and have a connection to the korban that they're offering as well. But smicha, but the smicha that we do on the animal really does need to be with all of your weight. Amr Papa says, this implies that the sides of an animal are forbidden. because if it enters your mind that the sides of the animal are permitted, then let him do smicha on the sides. Meaning there was machlokas that we had all the way at the end of Masechta Shabbos, right, about the sides of an animal, the sides of a tree. Ki'ilu, when you ride on an animal, you ride on the top of an animal. What about the sides of an animal? Can you kind of lean on the sides of the animal? So this implies that the sides of the animal are basically like the top of the animal. That's why we're saying that if you say that you're not allowed to do smicha, so you're not allowed to do smicha whether it's the top, whether it's the sides, because if the sides were okay, well then even if you say you're not allowed to do smicha on the sides of the animal. So this implies that even the sides of the animal are forbidden. Because if it enters your mind that the sides are permitted, so just mele just do smicha on the side of the animal, and then you do smicha, right? Feed two birds with one seed. You do smicha, and it's not an issue of getting like riding an animal on Yom Tov. So rather it must be that stadin are also forbidden. And that's why you would not be allowed to use the sides of the animal to do smicha. If you say that it is forbidden. So Rav Ashi Amar afilu temet stadin mutar, and you can even say that stadin of the animal are permitted. However, called the bahade gaba kegaba dami. However, when you do smicha on the head of the animal, and the head is basically level with its back, with its top of it, with the top of the animal, and therefore it's considered like the top of the animal. And if you do smicha, so even if you say that the sides are permitted, but you have to do smicha on the head of the animal, and that would have to be, and that would not be allowed. Well, friends, that was daf Tes Zayin, daf 16 of Masechta Hagiga. I think it was pretty interesting. I mean, the first part of the daf, we had a whole bunch of agadatas about all sorts of interesting things, and then we got to a new Mishnah, which I think was mind-blowing because it kind of goes through all the zugos, and it also mentions the first machlokas apparently in Israel, which is regarding smicha, leaning on an animal before slaughtering it on Yom Tov. Along the way, we had a discussion about Rabbi Yehuda ben Tabe and Shimon ben Shatach. The question being, who was the nasi, who was the abezdin? Says they were married that Yehuda ben Tabe was the nasi and Shimon ben Shatach was the abezdin. Chacham say the opposite, punkt fakert, that Shimon ben Shatach was the nasi and Yehuda ben Tabe was the abezdin. Along the way, we learned about aydm zomemim and how, right, the concept of kasher zom lasos la'achiv, that when you have witnesses who try to get somebody in trouble, but they turn out to be frauds because they were somewhere else, it was proven that they were somewhere else at that time, so then we do to them like they tried to do to somebody else. And at the end of the daf, we saw an interesting question about when you do smicha on an animal, when you lean on an animal, does it have to be with all of your strength? And Rambam Bar Chama says it does have to be with all of your strength. We then tried to propose that maybe it does not have to be with all of your strength, but ultimately I think we assume that it would have to be with all of your strength. And finally, we saw an interesting question about what's with the sides of the animal. Okay, if you ride on top of an animal, so that's a shvus, it's a problem. But what about the sides of the animal? Initially, we wanted to say that it must be that the sides are also a problem, because if they were allowed, then you may as well do smicha on the sides. Alternatively, we could say no, the sides are taka allowed. The thing is, smicha has to be done on the head, and the head is not considered like the sides. Therefore, it's a question of if it's allowed or not. Friends, that was daf Tes Zayin, daf 16 of Masechta Hagiga. I hope you enjoyed. Peace out.